The rain came like punishment from the gods. Thunder tore across the sky as the Alpha's heir, the mute boy no one dared to touch, sank deeper into the mud. He waved his hands desperately, eyes wild, lips forming words that could never be heard. The maidens watched from the porch, their gowns spotless while his world drowned in silence. "Don't go near him," one whispered. "The Alpha will kill whoever touches his son." So they turned away. But she didn't. Mira, a nameless Omega with mud on her feet and courage in her bones, saw not a prince, not a curse, not a sin. She saw a child fighting the storm. Without thinking, she ran, barefoot, soaked, trembling. The mud clutched at her legs like claws, but she kept moving. When she reached him, the boy's eyes locked on hers, terrified, pleading, human. "It's all right," she whispered, though he couldn't hear her. "You're safe now." She wrapped her arms around him, pulling him from the pit as thunder exploded overhead. For one heartbeat, the world stood still. An Omega holding an Alpha's blood, the unthinkable, made real. Then came the gasp. The porch went silent. Dozens of eyes watched as the lowest of wolves defied every law. And somewhere in the storm, fate stirred. Because in that moment, the mute heir found his first voice, not in sound, but in the heartbeat of the girl who saved him. Chapter 1. The Mute Heir. The sky rumbled like a warning. Dark clouds coiled above the Silverfang training field, swallowing the morning sun until the world dimmed to pewter. Ryan Draven stood at the edge of the field, hands clasped behind his back, his golden eyes fixed on the sparring warriors below. He was the Alpha's son, the heir of Silverfang. Yet in this moment, he looked like a ghost among them. He did not cheer. He did not command. He did not speak, because he could not. Silence had been his shadow since birth. Not a single word had ever crossed his lips. And though the healers called it a gift of the moon, the pack whispered a harsher truth. Cursed, muted heir, the Alpha's broken legacy. Ryan heard it all, though they thought he didn't. Words could wound, even when they were whispers carried on wind. "Look at him," one soldier murmured under his breath. "A future Alpha who can't even call to his pack." "Careful," another warned softly. "His father hears everything." Alpha Kale Draven, towering, stern, his presence like a blade drawn in daylight, stood on the far side of the field. He was a man carved from command, every motion efficient, every glance a warning. When his eyes passed over Ryan, they softened for a heartbeat, then hardened again, as if even tenderness might shame him. Thunder rolled low in the distance. Training ended abruptly. The warriors bowed. But Ryan lingered, standing in the drizzle that had begun to fall, watching the others run for shelter. The raindrops hit his skin, cold and sharp, but he didn't move. When he tilted his face to the sky, the storm clouds reflected in his eyes, vast and silent, just like him. He wanted to roar, to feel his throat burn with sound, to make the storm answer him. But when he opened his mouth, nothing, only breath, only air. He swallowed the ache and turned toward the mansion on the hill. His father was already gone. Behind him, thunder cracked again, louder this time, close enough to shake the earth beneath his feet. Yet Ryan didn't flinch. He almost smiled. Because in storms, everyone was silent, and for a moment, the world finally matched him. Chapter 2. The storm breaks. The rain came harder. By midday, the Silverfang mansion was wrapped in gray curtains of water. Servants hurried through the corridors with towels and trays, muttering prayers to the moon goddess as the thunder rattled windows. In the laundry room below, Mira scrubbed at a pile of soaked garments until her fingers burned. The scent of wet fur and lye clung to her skin. "Faster!" barked Mistress Elna, the head servant, her voice sharp as vinegar. "Those belong to the Alpha's soldiers, girl." "Yes, mistress," Mira murmured, She didn't look up. She knew better than to meet the woman's eyes. Omegas like her weren't meant to speak loudly, stand tall, or ever be noticed. Still, her thoughts betrayed her. Why is kindness treated like weakness here? She wondered. Why does everyone bow to fear instead of heart? Outside, the rain pounded against the shutters. Wild, furious, alive. Each drop echoed in her chest like a pulse. Something in her stirred, restless. "Fool girl," one of the older maids muttered nearby. "If this keeps up, the training grounds will flood again." Mira froze, the cloth in her hand dripping. The training grounds? Aye. The Alpha's boy was there earlier watching the warriors. Poor thing's probably hiding under a tree now. "Let him," the other maid snorted. "He's the Alpha's heir, not our concern." But it was her concern. She didn't know why, only that it was. Without permission, she rose. The world above trembled with thunder. Her heart began to race. "Mira!" Mistress Elna's voice cracked through the air. "Where do you think you're going?" She hesitated. She couldn't lie. "Outside. I need to..." "To what? Drown yourself? Get back to work." But Mira's feet were already moving. She grabbed her cloak and ran, through the corridor, past the startled guards, out the door. The rain hit like knives, cold, merciless, alive. She could barely see through it, but she didn't stop. Somewhere beyond the courtyard, near the training field, she thought she saw movement. A small figure struggling in the downpour. "Moon, help me," she whispered, and then she ran faster. Chapter 3. The Omega Who Ran Toward Thunder. By the time she reached the field, it was chaos. The earth had turned to mud, thick and sucking beneath her feet. The rain came in sheets, blurring the world to shades of gray. The warriors had long since fled. The training post stood like broken bones in the storm. And there, in the middle of it, was him. Ryan, the Alpha's son. Knee-deep in sludge, his hands clawing at the ground, trying to pull free. His clothes clung to his frame, his hair plastered to his forehead. He was shaking, but silent. Utterly silent. "Ryan!" she shouted over the storm. He didn't look up. Maybe he couldn't hear her. Every instinct screamed for her to stop. "He's the Alpha's heir. You'll be killed for touching him." But another voice whispered louder. The one in her chest. "He's just a boy." Without thinking, she waded forward. The mud clawed at her legs, heavy as chains. Each step was a battle. "It's all right," she called again, though her voice was breaking. "I'm here." Ryan saw her then. Wide, golden eyes locking with hers through the rain. For a heartbeat, the world stilled. Then he stumbled. Mira lunged, catching his arm before he fell. The impact sent them both crashing to their knees in the mud. Her hands burned, her heart thundered, but she didn't let go. "Don't be afraid," she breathed. "You're safe now." He couldn't answer, but his fingers trembled against hers. She felt his fear like a living thing, and something inside her, something small and fierce, broke open. "Hold on to me," she whispered. He did. Together they struggled through the rain until the sound of footsteps thundered from behind, soldiers shouting, finally arriving. But when they saw her, an Omega cradling the Alpha's son, they froze. Every law, every tradition, every whispered thread in Silverfang hung between them like lightning suspended in air. Then a deeper voice cut through the storm. "Enough!" Alpha Kale's silhouette appeared through the rain, tall, dark, commanding. His cloak whipped in the wind like a banner of wrath. Mira's breath hitched. She looked up, mud streaked across her face, eyes wide with terror. Ryan still clung to her, trembling, refusing to release her sleeve. For a long, terrible moment, no one moved. The storm raged around them, thunder, wind, rain, and the pack watched the impossible unfold. An Omega in the mud, the Alpha's heir in her arms, and destiny watching from the shadows. Chapter 4. The morning after the storm had passed, but its ghost still haunted the air. Rainwater dripped from the eaves of the Silverfang mansion like the slow ticking of a clock counting down to judgment. Servants moved in hushed clusters, their voices sharp as needles, stitching rumors faster than they folded linens. "She touched him," one maid whispered, her tone half scandal, half awe. "With both hands," another replied. "Pulled him from the mud like a wolf snatching prey." "A cursed act," someone muttered. "An Omega reaching for the Alpha's heir? The moon will demand blood." The story twisted as it traveled, gaining new teeth with every retelling. By breakfast, some swore Mira had kissed the boy's forehead. Others claimed she'd defied the Alpha himself in front of the warriors. None of it was true, but truth mattered less than gossip. In the servants' wing, Mira sat on the edge of her narrow cot, hair still damp, fingers clenched in her apron. She could hear them outside her door, maids, kitchen boys, guards pretending to pass by, each taking turns peering through the cracked frame. "She'll be gone by sunset," one said. "Buried by then," another replied. Mira shut her eyes. Her body still ached from the rescue, the weight of Ryan, the bite of cold rain. But it was the silence afterward that hurt most. No one had thanked her. No one had spoken to her. Only stares, sharp as knives. She kept seeing the boy's eyes. Golden, frightened, clinging to her like she was the only solid thing left in a world made of storms. Maybe she'd done wrong. Maybe kindness really was rebellion here. The door creaked open. Nella slipped inside, breathless. "Mira, they're saying the Alpha smashed a table in his hall. He's furious." Mira's heart lurched. "At me. At everyone. At himself. No one knows." "Then it's only a matter of time," Mira whispered. Nella grasped her hands. "You could run. There's still time before the patrols change." Mira hesitated. Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance, a reminder. "No," she said finally. "If I flee, they'll say it was guilt, and he—" Her voice faltered. "He might think I abandoned him." "The heir?" Mira nodded. "He was trembling, Nella. He needed someone." Her friend stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. "You're mad," she murmured. "Mad or chosen." Before Mira could answer, a bell rang from the main corridor. Deep, metallic, final. The Alpha was awake, and he was calling for order. Mira rose slowly. "Then let him see me." Chapter 5. The Alpha's arrival. Cale Draven did not sleep. When dawn bled over the Silverfang Valley, he was still standing by the tall window of his chamber, staring at the field below where the mud had already begun to dry. The servants would clear the mess before noon. They always did. But the image in his mind, the Omega in the storm, his son clinging to her, refused to wash away. He wanted to be angry. He was angry. Yet beneath the anger coiled something far more dangerous: shame. Because when his son had needed him, he had not been there. Because a stranger's courage had made his power look hollow. Because he had seen, for a flicker of a moment, the same fire in that girl's eyes that once lived in Leora's. Leora, his mate, his moonlight. Gone these 10 years, leaving him with a child who bore her gentleness but none of her voice. The healers had said the boy's silence was divine balance, a gift of empathy. The elders had called it a curse. Cale had never believed either. He only knew it was a wound he couldn't mend. And last night, that wound had bled in public. He slammed a fist against the table. The goblet toppled, wine pooling like blood across the map of his territory. A knock at the door. "My lord," murmured his beta Tsian, stepping inside. "The council expects you at midday." Kyle didn't turn. And the girl? Confined in the servants' wing, awaiting judgment. Cale's jaw tightened. "Bring her to the Great Hall." "My lord!" "Now." The beta bowed and left. Cale stared once more at the horizon. The clouds had thinned to silver threads. In their pale reflection, He saw himself, an alpha feared by all and loved by none. He descended the staircase slowly, every step echoing through the marble corridors. Servants scattered, bowing low. The scent of fear followed him like incense. In the great hall, the torches burned weakly, their light swallowed by morning gloom. Ryan sat near the dais, small and solemn, his eyes fixed on the door. When Mira entered between two guards, Cale's pulse shifted. She looked smaller than he remembered, mud washed clean but defiant still clinging to her like a second skin. He dismissed the guards with a gesture. The door shut behind them. Silence stretched. "Do you know who I am?" he asked quietly. "Yes, my alpha," she said, voice trembling. "Then you know the cost of what you did." "I do." "Then why?" She looked up, meeting his gaze, terrified, yet unwavering. "Because he was drowning in the storm, and no one moved." Kyle's throat tightened. "You presume my pack cowards?" "I saw fear," she said simply, "and I couldn't bear it." The honesty in her tone disarmed him more than pleading ever could. He took a step closer, studying her face, the mud-stained lashes, the cracked lips, the faint tremor in her hands. Ryan rose suddenly from his seat and crossed the hall. He grasped Mira's sleeve with small, muddy fingers. "Ryan," Kyle warned. The boy looked up at him, golden eyes pleading, and shook his head fiercely. He didn't want her punished. Something inside Kale cracked. He turned away, voice rough. "Leave us!" Kian hesitated by the doorway. "My alpha? Go." When they were alone, Kale exhaled slowly. "You've thrown this house into chaos, Omega. You've made me look weak." "I didn't mean to shame you," Mira whispered. "I only meant to save him." He should have roared, should have commanded her silence, but the words died in his throat. Because she had said save him, not help him, and he knew the difference. The storm outside had ended, yet somehow Kale felt it still, raging quietly beneath his skin. Chapter 6. Whispers Before Dawn. That night, the mansion slept uneasily. Mira sat alone in the laundry cellar, wrists still red from the guard's grip. She wasn't chained, but she might as well have been. The waiting was its own kind of prison. A soft shuffle broke the silence. The old healer, Mayra, appeared in the doorway, a lamp casting a warm halo around her wrinkled face. "Child," she said softly, "the moon moves strangely tonight. It seems you've stirred her interest." Mira rose, startled. "Mara, should I bow?" The old woman chuckled. "To me? Never. To fate, perhaps." She moved closer, examining Mira's hands. Still shaking. "Fear or faith?" "I don't know." "Good," Mira murmured. "Not knowing keeps the heart honest." She sat beside her on the bench. For a long moment, neither spoke. Rainwater dripped through the ceiling in slow, rhythmic drops. "You did a dangerous thing, girl," Mayra said finally, "but a necessary one. There are storms that clean and storms that destroy. You may be both." Mira's voice wavered. "They'll punish me. Maybe. Or maybe they'll change because of you. Compassion is the most treacherous magic of all. It demands blood before it gives peace." Mira looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" The old woman's eyes gleamed like candlelight. "Every act of courage asks for a price. You saved the boy once. You may have to do it again." The cellar door creaked as wind rushed through, carrying distant thunder. "Go to sleep, Mira," Mayra whispered, standing. "Tomorrow will test more than your heart." When the door closed, Mira lay back on her cot, staring at the flickering shadows on the wall. Somewhere above she could hear Ryan pacing, soft footsteps, restless as her thoughts. The storm had ended, but the air still hummed, alive with something unseen. As sleep finally claimed her, one thought echoed in her mind. If compassion costs blood, whose will it be? Chapter 7. Summoned to the Hall. The Great Hall of Silverfang was not a place for mercy. It was carved from black granite and wolf bone, its vaulted ceiling painted with scenes of conquest. Generations of alphas baring teeth at the world. Every stone carried an echo of judgment. Every torch burned with the promise of law. That morning, the hall was silent. The stormlight still lingered through the stained glass windows, making the marble floor gleam like cold water. Mira stood at the center of it, barefoot, head bowed, hands clasped tight before her. The guards had stripped away her servant's apron, leaving her in a plain gray shift. Neither Omega nor human, just a trembling figure before the throne. At the far end, Alpha Kale sat upon his seat of carved obsidian. The council lined both sides, their cloaks heavy with rank and fear. Between the banners, behind a red curtain, small golden eyes watched. Ryan. He shouldn't have been there, but Kale had allowed it. Maybe to teach him what law meant. Maybe because the boy refused to be kept away. The air itself held its breath. Kian, the beta, stepped forward and unfurled a scroll. Mira of the servant caste, you are called here for violation of pack law, touching the alpha's heir without command or consent. Whispers rippled along the benches. Mira lifted her chin slightly. Her heart pounded, but her voice, when it came, was steady. He was drowning, my lord. I couldn't stand by. A murmur passed through the council, half scandal, half admiration. Kyle raised one hand, and the room fell to silence again. Outside, a low growl of thunder rolled across the hills. Inside, time hung heavy as fog. Kyle rose slowly. You broke law, he said, his tone calm but dangerous. You placed your hands on my son. Yes, Alpha. You defied your place. I did. Do you understand what that means? Yes. She hesitated. It means I valued his life over my fear. The words struck like flint. A few of the older council members inhaled sharply. One dropped his quill. Kyle's jaw tightened, yet something flickered behind his eyes. Not rage, but recognition. The torchlight flickered, casting their shadows together on the floor. The Alpha towering, the Omega small but unyielding. For the first time, they looked less like master and servant, and more like two souls who'd both refused to bow to the storm. Ryan's hands gripped the curtain until his knuckles went white. Kyle turned from her and walked slowly back to his throne, every step echoing. We will decide your fate before sunset, he said finally. Then softer, you may wait in the hall. But as he passed, Mira caught the faintest scent of rain still clinging to his cloak, and realized the storm wasn't finished. Chapter 8, Why Did You Do It? The waiting burned worse than fear. The council dispersed for the noon meal, leaving Mira alone in the cavernous hall. The torches hissed and crackled. The sound was too much like breathing. Then a voice, low, quiet, near the dais. Come forward. Kyle. He had dismissed the guards. The chamber felt smaller now, the distance between them alive with tension. Mira obeyed, footsteps echoing across the marble. When she reached him, she knelt. My Alpha. Look at me. She did. Kyle studied her in silence. Her hair had dried into dark tangles. There was a small cut across her cheek from the storm's debris. She looked fragile, and yet she stood straighter than most warriors ever did before him. Why did you do it? He asked again, voice softer this time. And don't give me the same answer you gave the council. Mira hesitated. Because I saw him, she whispered. Not the heir, not the curse, just a child who was afraid. Kyle's hands curled into fists. Do you think I don't see him? He's my blood. I think you see what others see in you, not what he needs from you, she said, then flinched at her own boldness. Forgive me, my Alpha. But Kale didn't strike her down. Instead, he turned away, shoulders rigid. When his mother died, he said quietly, he stopped speaking entirely. I told myself he would heal. That silence was strength, but maybe I was only teaching him to vanish. Mira's breath caught. She had not expected confession. You risked everything for him, Cale went on, voice low, almost bitter. Do you understand that if he had fallen, I would have killed anyone near him, including you? Yes, she said simply. Then why were you not afraid? I was, she admitted, but fear loses its voice when love speaks louder. Kyle looked over his shoulder, startled by the rawness in her tone. There was no manipulation there, no flattery, just truth. It felt like the first honest sound he'd heard in years. He stepped closer, close enough that the scent of cedar and rain surrounded her. What are you, Omega? He murmured. Fool? Or prophet? Neither, she whispered. Just someone who couldn't watch a child drown. Between them, the silence stretched until it wasn't silence at all. It was understanding. Two different worlds, two wounded hearts, and for a moment, the same rhythm in their breathing. From behind the curtain, Ryan watched, eyes wide. He couldn't hear the words, but he saw what they meant. His father's shoulders had lowered. The storm in the Alpha's face had softened. And for the first time in his life, Ryan saw his father look at someone with something like respect. Chapter 9. The crack in Stone Knight fell quietly over Silverfang. The hall was empty now, save for the echo of footsteps, Cale's, pacing the length of his study. Tian stood near the door, arms folded, voice sharp with worry. You're letting sentiment cloud judgment, my lord. The girl defied the order of things. Cale stopped by the hearth. The order of things nearly cost my son his life. Kian stepped forward. She humiliated you in front of the pack. If you spare her, they'll say you've gone soft. Soft? Cale's laugh was short and cold. She walked into a storm while others watched from shelter. Tell me which of us is soft. The beta stiffened. The council won't accept her survival. Then they can choke on their pride, Cale growled, voice low, dangerous. Kian hesitated, then bowed stiffly. As you command. But know this, mercy makes enemies faster than cruelty. When the door closed, Cale sank into his chair. For a long time he stared into the fire, the orange glow reflecting in his eyes like trapped suns. He thought of Mira's words. Fear loses its voice when love speaks louder. He thought of Ryan, asleep somewhere upstairs, clutching the small wooden wolf his mother once carved. And he thought of the way the girl's voice had trembled, not with fear, but with conviction. He didn't know what to do with that kind of courage. So instead of sleeping, he moved to the balcony, watching the servants' quarters below. A faint lamp burned there, one tiny glow against the dark. She was awake. He found himself watching her, just for a moment. The way her silhouette moved as she folded cloths, her hair falling loose, the calm she carried even in exile. Something inside him shifted, small but irreversible. The Alpha who ruled by fear had just begun to learn curiosity. And that curiosity would change everything. Chapter 10. The Ultimatum. By dawn, the Silverfang Council had gathered again. The hall was colder this time. The fire had been doused, and smoke from the torches coiled along the ceiling like restless spirits. Every elder sat rigid, their robes heavy with self-importance. Their murmurs filled the air like the rustle of dry leaves before a storm. When Cale entered, the sound stopped. He moved like thunder made flesh, calm, contained, but dangerous. Mira followed behind him, her footsteps soft against the stone. Bring the girl forward, one of the elders barked. She stands where I can see her, Cale replied, voice flat. The council exchanged nervous glances. Chian stepped forward, breaking the silence. My lord, the laws are clear. No Omega may touch the Alpha bloodline. Her actions demand punishment. Cale's gaze swept the room. And yet, here my son stands, alive, because of her. The elders shifted uncomfortably. One of them, Elder Varys, spoke with a sneer. An Omega saved him? The boy should never have needed saving if he carried the true strength of his father. Kale's eyes flashed gold. "Mind your words, Varys." But Mira's soft voice cut through the tension. "It isn't strength that saves a life. It's mercy." A murmur rippled through the room. The audacity of her speaking unbidden was enough to make hearts stop. Kale turned to her slowly. "Do you understand what you just risked saying, girl?" "Yes, Alpha," she whispered. "But you asked for truth, not silence." A long pause followed. Then Kale exhaled, turning to face his counsel once more. "She will not be punished," he declared, "but she will not be free." Confusion broke out at once, voices overlapping, protests rising. Kyle silenced them with a raised hand. "She will serve under my household, not as a servant of the lower quarters, but as attendant to the heir." The uproar was instant. "That is madness. You would let her near him again? Alpha, she'll poison the boy's mind." Kyle's voice thundered across the chamber. "She already has, with courage." The words fell heavy as stone. When the noise finally died, Kale turned to Mira. "You have a choice," he said quietly. "Exile beyond the borders of Silverfang, or remain here as my son's attendant, bound by duty, watched by every eye, judged by every breath." Mira's pulse raced. Exile meant freedom, but also death. Wolves who left the pack rarely survived the wildlands. Remaining meant chains, but also the chance to protect the boy who had clung to her in the storm. She raised her chin. "I will stay." Kyle studied her for a moment, unreadable. Then he gave a small nod. "So be it." The council muttered curses beneath their breath. Kyle turned away. The matter closed. But inside, a storm had shifted direction. The Omega girl had chosen the cage, and somehow, that unsettled the Alpha far more than defiance ever had. Chapter 11. Among Wolves. The upper courtyard smelled of cedar and rain when Mira entered for the first time. This was the heart of Silverfang, where the elite lived, where gold-trimmed armor shone brighter than the sun, where every smile hid a knife. She walked behind Ryan's nursemaid toward the boys' quarters. The path wound through the private gardens, a world so beautiful it almost mocked her. Roses the color of blood lined the marble path, their scent thick in the air. A fountain trickled nearby, its water crystal clear, untouched by the mud of the lower grounds. Yet beneath the beauty lurked whispers. "Look, that's her. The Omega who touched the air. She walks beside him now?" Mira kept her eyes down. Her heart thudded with every step. She wanted to vanish, yet every stare pressed harder against her skin. Ryan walked beside her, small hand brushing her sleeve now and then, as if to reassure himself she was real. His eyes stayed fixed ahead, unreadable, but the smallest flicker of comfort softened his silence. Inside the heir's chambers, sunlight poured through glass panels etched with the Silverfang crest. The room was vast, shelves of carved wolves, maps, weapons, books, things she had never been allowed to touch before. "Your new post," said the nursemaid coldly. "You are to tend to the heir's lessons and his meals. Speak only when spoken to, and keep your hands clean." When the door shut, Ryan exhaled, a soundless sigh. Mira turned to him. "I suppose we're both prisoners now," she said softly. He blinked, tilting his head. Then he smiled, a small crooked thing that made her chest ache. "Do you want to go outside?" she asked. He nodded. In the garden, the rain had left jewels of water trembling on the leaves. Ryan walked barefoot, tracing patterns in the wet earth with a stick. Mira followed a few steps behind, half guard, half shadow. "Why do they look at you like that?" she asked quietly, knowing he couldn't answer. He paused, bent down, and drew something in the dirt. A small wolf, trapped inside a circle. Then, with one quick motion, he broke the circle open. Mira's breath caught. "Because you want to be free," she murmured. He looked up, eyes bright, and nodded. And for the first time, She didn't feel like a servant looking after an heir. She felt like someone who'd finally found another soul that understood what it meant to live behind invisible bars. Chapter 12. The Bond of Silence. Days passed quietly. Mira learned the rhythm of the heir's world, his gestures, his moods, the unspoken language of a boy who had never known sound, but spoke with his entire being. She began teaching him new signs beyond the ones his tutors had drilled. Thank you, safe, friend. Each lesson became a heartbeat in their strange, shared language. Sometimes she caught Cale watching from afar, standing by the balcony above the garden, arms crossed, unreadable. She wondered if he regretted letting her stay, or if part of him feared what he might see when his son began to smile again. One afternoon, while sorting Ryan's books, Mira found a small leather-bound sketchbook tucked beneath his bed. The pages were filled with drawings, wolves, forests, the moon. But on the last page, something different. It was her, drawn in delicate, uncertain strokes. Mud streaked on her cheeks, rain in her hair, her arms wrapped around a child in the storm. Mira's breath caught. You remembered. Ryan flushed slightly, hiding his face behind his hands. She knelt, smiling softly. You're an artist, Ryan. You have a voice after all. He looked up, eyes wide with pride. And then, unexpectedly, he laughed. It was silent, breathy, but bright. And that soundless laugh filled the room more completely than any roar. From the doorway, Kyle paused, unseen. For the first time in years, he felt something uncoil in his chest, a quiet warmth that both terrified and soothed him. The Omega's presence had not weakened his house. It had begun to heal it. Mira brushed Ryan's hair aside, still smiling. See? Even silence can laugh if the heart listens closely enough. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, and for the first time since the storm, the Silverfang mansion no longer felt haunted. It felt alive. Chapter 13. The Seeds of Envy. Lyra of Silverfang had once imagined herself the future Luna. She was bred for it, groomed since childhood to stand beside Alpha Kale's heir, to wear moon-white silk and command obedience with a single glance. Her bloodline was pure, her posture perfect, her smile polished enough to cut. But the storm had changed everything. Now, when she passed through the courtyard, she heard whispers that made her claws itch. They say the Omega tends the heir herself. The boy laughs now, because of her. Kale lets her near him every day. Each word struck like a thorn under skin. From her balcony, Lyra watched Mira cross the garden below, barefoot, simple, unadorned, and yet somehow radiant. The Omega moved as though unbothered by the weight of judgment. She didn't bow enough. She didn't cower enough. She belonged, and that was the worst part. Do you envy her? Her sister Corin asked lazily one evening, pouring honeyed wine. Lyra's lips tightened. Envy? No, I pity her. When the Alpha grows tired of his experiment, she'll be nothing but another rumor. Yet even as she said it, jealousy coiled like smoke through her ribs, because she had seen the way Kale's gaze softened when he looked down from the balcony, the way his expression shifted, faint, but undeniable. He never looked at Lyra like that. She had waited years for a glance that said, "You matter," and somehow a mud-soaked Omega had stolen it without trying. That night, she made a quiet vow. If kindness could raise an Omega, cruelty could break her just as easily. Chapter 14. The Gathering Moon. The Silverfang Pack's Moon Festival was the grandest event of the season, a night of silk and silver, of vows renewed under the full moon's gaze. The courtyard buzzed with excitement as servants hung lanterns shaped like wolves, and music from the lower musicians floated on the wind. The scent of roasted venison mingled with lavender oil and envy. Mira worked quietly among the crowd, arranging flowers near the heir's seat. She tried not to notice the stares, the whispers, the way every movement seemed to invite judgment. She shouldn't be here. a noblewoman hissed behind her fan. An omega among royals. Disgraceful. Mira kept her eyes low, but Ryan, sitting nearby, saw everything. His hands curled into fists on his lap. Kale had forbidden him from shifting until his training was complete, but his wolf stirred restlessly beneath his skin. He could feel Mira's discomfort, her pulse quickening under the weight of 100 eyes. As the drums began to beat, the nobles took their places in the circle. The moonlight spilled like liquid silver across the marble, and the festival began with the traditional dance of unity. Lyra stepped forward in shimmering white, her gown catching every flicker of torchlight. She looked perfect, every line rehearsed, every smile a weapon. Then she turned, graceful as a serpent, and accidentally brushed against Mira's arm. The cup of petals Mira carried tipped, scattering blossoms across the floor. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Oh, how clumsy," Lyra said sweetly. "Perhaps next time the servants should stay where they belong." Laughter followed, sharp, cruel. Mira knelt quickly, gathering the petals, her cheeks burning. She said nothing, not because she was weak, but because speaking would only make her more of a target. From across the dais, Kale watched the scene unfold, his expression unreadable. He did not intervene, not yet. He was measuring, watching how both the Omega and his son would respond. Ryan's nails dug into his palms, his breath came fast. The wolf in him clawed at the surface. Lyra smiled triumphantly, basking in the murmured approval of her peers. She turned to curtsy toward the Alpha's throne, and froze, because the heir was gone. Chapter 15. Mind to protect. A low growl rolled through the courtyard before anyone saw him. Ryan stood in front of Mira, small frame trembling but unyielding, golden eyes glowing like molten light beneath the moon. The crowd fell silent. He didn't speak. He couldn't. But his message was clear as thunder. When Lyra took a step forward, Ryan shifted one foot, his claws flashing. A warning. Gasps spread like wildfire. "Ryan!" Kale's voice cracked through the air. But the boy didn't move. His shoulders heaved with quiet fury, his stare locked on Lyra like a promise. Mira rose slowly, reaching out a hand. "Ryan. It's all right." He shook his head, chest rising and falling, eyes fierce. Then, with trembling hands, he signed the word that broke every heart watching. "Mine." Silence reigned. The nobles looked to Kale, expecting wrath. But the Alpha only watched, expression taut with something unreadable. Pride, fear, recognition. Mira's breath caught. Her throat tightened, and for a heartbeat, she didn't know whether to cry or smile. She knelt before him, placing her hand over his trembling one. "No, Ryan," she whispered softly. "Not mine or yours, just safe." The boy's breathing steadied, his claws retracted, his shoulders lowering, but his gaze remained defiant, daring anyone to challenge the word he'd claimed. Lyra's face paled under the torchlight. He threatens me for her?" Kale rose slowly, descending the dais with the grace of a predator. "He defends what none of you had the courage to protect." The crowd parted. The music had long stopped. When Kale reached them, he placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Enough," he murmured. Ryan hesitated, then nodded, eyes still burning. Kale turned to Mira. "You've stirred more than just hearts, Omega," he said quietly. "You've awakened fire where there was only silence." Mira bowed her head, her voice trembling. "Forgive him, my Alpha. He only wanted—" Kyle interrupted, eyes still on his son. "No forgiveness needed." Then, to the crowd, "Let it be known that any who mock my son, or those he chooses to protect, mock the Alpha himself." The warning hung heavy in the air. When he turned to leave, his cloak brushed against Mira's hand. A fleeting contact, but one that made her pulse stutter. Because for the first time, she thought she saw understanding in the Alpha's eyes. And when the drums began again, No one dared look at her the same way. Above them, the moon blazed bright, bearing silent witness to the shift no one could yet name. Chapter 16: The Dancers and the Daggers. The night of the moon festival shimmered like a dream, bright, glittering, and deceptive. Lanterns floated above the courtyard like captured stars, their light washing the marble in gold and shadow. Wolves from every allied pack had gathered, dressed in silk and silver, their laughter ringing through the night. To outsiders, it was a night of unity. To the Silverfang pack, it was a test of peace. Mira stood at the edge of the dance floor, helping Rian adjust the collar of his ceremonial cloak. His small hands fidgeted, nervous under the weight of so many eyes. "You'll do fine," she whispered, brushing his sleeve. "Just stay near the guards." He nodded, though his gaze kept flicking toward the crowd. His senses were sharper now. He could feel something off in the air. The music was too loud, the smiles too polished, the moon too still. From across the court, Alpha Kyle spoke with visiting alphas, his tone cordial but his body tense. His instincts had never failed him, and tonight they howled in warning. Among the guests, a group of young heirs from the rival Bloodcrest pack lingered near the edge of the crowd. Their eyes followed Rian like wolves stalking prey. One whispered, "That's the mute heir." Another smirked. "They call him cursed. Let's see what kind of curse bleeds." The words were low, cruel, drowned by the music. Mira caught only the sharp glint of a dagger slipping into one boy's sleeve. Her heart lurched. She looked for Kale, but he was surrounded, trapped in conversation, his back turned. The drums began to quicken. Dancers whirled in circles of silver and red. The moon climbed higher, pale and heavy as bone. Mira's breath shortened. Something was wrong. Every instinct screamed, "Move!" And when one of the Bloodcrest heirs brushed too close to Ryan, she saw it. Just a flicker of motion, the glint of a blade beneath a silk cuff. Her pulse thundered. "Ryan!" The boy looked up. Too late. Chapter 17: The Ambush. It happened all at once. A flash of steel, a snarl, a scream swallowed by the music. Mira moved before thought, body reacting on instinct. She lunged across the marble, knocking Ryan to the ground just as the dagger sliced through the space where his throat had been. The blade caught her instead. Pain burst white behind her eyes. Hot, sharp, final. Blood, her blood, splattered across the pale stones. Gasps erupted. The music faltered, died. Ryan stared at her, frozen, his hands slick with red as he tried to understand what had happened. She pressed a trembling hand to his chest, her voice barely a whisper. "Stay down." But the attackers weren't finished. Two more stepped forward, shifting mid-movement, bones cracking, claws extending under moonlight. The guards were seconds too slow. Mira turned, her wolf stirring inside her, weak, untrained, but desperate. She pushed herself up, arms shaking. Her instincts screamed to run, but she couldn't. Not while the boy still breathed. One heir lunged. She caught his arm with both hands, twisting until the blade clattered to the ground. His claws tore her shoulder, but she didn't stop. The second heir slashed at her back, sending her crashing into the fountain's edge. Water turned crimson around her. "Mira!" She couldn't hear the voice, only the vibration of his panic. Ryan's hands trembled as he crawled toward her, trying to pull her up. "No," she mouthed, shaking her head. "Stay back." Thunder cracked overhead. The torches flared. Warriors finally swarmed, too late to undo what had already begun. Mira's vision blurred. The edges of the world darkened. Her last sight was Ryan's terrified face, the same boy she'd pulled from the storm now reaching for her through chaos. And just before the darkness took her, she whispered one word, too soft to hear. "Live." Chapter 18: The Cry. Silence, then sound. It began as a rasp, a broken gasp tearing free from Ryan's throat. Then it grew, Raw, jagged, primal, a scream, a real, living sound. The courtyard froze. The crowd stared, stunned, as the mute heir of Silverfang screamed his first wordless roar under the blood-streaked moon. Cale heard it from across the square. The goblet slipped from his hand, shattering against the marble. Wine and blood mixed at his feet. For a heartbeat, he couldn't move. That voice, his son's voice, was impossible, miraculous, terrifying. Then instinct overtook him. He ran. When he reached the fountain, Mira lay motionless in Ryan's arms, her blood soaking his cloak. The boy's scream had turned into desperate sobs, his small hands pressing against the wound as if sheer will could stop the bleeding. "She saved me," he signed through trembling fingers. "She saved me again." Cale fell to his knees beside them, the proud alpha stripped of every wall. His hands shook as he touched the girl's wrist. Weak pulse, barely there. "Get the healer!" he bellowed. Warriors scattered like frightened birds. Cale gathered his son close, one arm around each of them, his heir and the Omega who had once waded into mud to save that heir's life. Rain began to fall again, soft and relentless. It washed the blood from the marble, but not from their hands. Ryan clung to Mira's sleeve, silent again now, but changed forever. The boy who could not speak had found his voice in the only way the moon would allow, through loss. And in that moment, Cale understood the cruel mercy of fate. Sometimes the gods gave a voice only to those who were ready to scream. Chapter 19. The Kneeling Alpha. The storm returned the next night. Not the one that tore through trees or flooded the fields. This one raged inside Alpha Cale Draven. Thunder growled over Silverfang Keep as he paced the healer's hall, his cloak soaked, his hands blood-stained from carrying her. Mira lay motionless on the cot, pale as moonlight, breath faint but stubbornly alive. Cale had seen war. He had buried friends. He had faced the claws of beasts and the betrayal of rivals. But nothing had ever hollowed him like this girl's stillness. She wasn't supposed to matter. She wasn't supposed to mean anything. And yet here he was, a ruler brought to his knees by the sight of a dying Omega. "Hold pressure there," the healer murmured, voice trembling. "If she makes it through the night, she might see the dawn." Cale nodded, barely hearing. His mind flashed back to the storm months ago, the first one. The night this same girl had carried his son from the mud. The rain had fallen like knives then, too, and she had defied every law to save what was his. Now it was his turn. He reached out, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. Her skin was cold. "You shouldn't have done it," he whispered. "You shouldn't have made me remember what it means to feel." Behind him, Ryan stood silently, eyes red-rimmed, his small body trembling. Cale turned, his voice breaking. "She saved you twice, my son. Twice. And I—" He couldn't finish. Words were useless when guilt strangled breath. Outside, lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the window in a burst of white. The rain pounded like drums of war. Cale knelt beside her bed. The great Alpha of Silverfang, feared across the northern clans, lowered his head until his forehead touched the back of her hand. "I've ruled with fear," he said softly. "But she ruled the storm with mercy." Ryan stepped closer. His small fingers brushed Cale's wrist, trembling, and began to sign one word. "Save." Cale swallowed hard. "I'll try." For once, the Alpha wasn't commanding the world. He was begging it. Chapter 20. The Breaking of Laws. By morning, the rain had not stopped, but neither had Cale. The Silverfang Council gathered in the Grand Hall, faces drawn, voices sharp. Word had already spread. The heir's protector lived, barely, and Cale had refused to let her be moved from the healer's wing. "It is improper," Elder Varys spat. "An Omega lying in the Alpha's care? You shame your bloodline." Cale rose slowly, The hall fell silent. His cloak dripped rain onto the marble, each drop echoing like a countdown. "Do you want to speak of shame?" he asked quietly. "Then let us begin there." He strode to the center of the chamber, every step echoing against stone. The banners above, stitched with wolves and moonlight, fluttered from the draft his fury carried. "For generations we've built our strength on cruelty," he said. "We've called mercy weakness. We've buried compassion under law. And for what? To raise sons who cannot speak? To breed leaders who mistake fear for loyalty?" The elders stirred, whispering. Kyle's beta, a grizzled wolf named Chian, stepped forward. "Alpha, I beg you to reconsider. The council will not tolerate—" Kale's growl silenced him. "The council will listen." He reached up, tore one of the carved plaques from the wall, the one etched with the Omega codes, the laws that forbade lower ranks from touch, from defense, from even speaking unless commanded. "These laws made cowards of us," Kale said, holding the plaque high. "Because of them, no one dared to help my son when he was dying in the mud. Because of them, only one Omega remembered what it meant to be a wolf with a heart. And then, without ceremony, he slammed the plaque against the stone pillar. It shattered. Gasps filled the hall. From the fragments, Kale picked up one jagged piece. Blood ran down his palm, but he didn't flinch. "Let this be the last blood I shed for pride," he said. "From this day forth, the Omega sub-laws are null. Every wolf in Silverfang stands by the same moon, under the same judgment." Varys rose, shaking. "You will destroy the balance." Kale's eyes burned gold. "The balance was already broken the moment you let a child drown in mud." Silence. Tian lowered his head, shame shadowing his face. "Then may the moon witness this change," he said hoarsely. "Silverfang will follow." Kale turned toward the doors. The rain had stopped, replaced by sunlight piercing through the storm clouds. He didn't smile, but something in his chest loosened. Maybe this was what redemption felt like. Heavy, raw, but necessary. Chapter 21. The Awakening. The healer's hall smelled of herbs and clean linen. The chaos of the festival felt like a dream now, distant, unreal. Mira floated between fever and silence, her body mending slower than her spirit. For days, the pack tiptoed around the hall, whispering the same question. Would she wake? Ryan barely left her side. He sat at the edge of her bed, sketchbook open, drawing small wolves curled under stars. His hands no longer trembled when he held a pencil. They moved with quiet purpose, as if his art could anchor her to life. Kale watched from the doorway. Every time he saw his son there, shoulders slumped but unbroken, he saw his mate's eyes in him. The same tenderness Kale had buried long ago. He stepped closer, setting a tray of warm broth beside the bed. "You should rest, Ryan," he murmured. The boy shook his head stubbornly. Hours passed. The candlelight dimmed. Mira stirred, faintly at first. A twitch of her fingers, a flutter beneath her lashes. Ryan froze, then leaned forward. "Mira?" Her lips parted, breath catching. The healer gasped from across the room. "Mira," Ryan said again, soft, trembling, spoken. The word broke like sunlight through storm clouds. Rough, uncertain, but real. Kale's knees nearly buckled. He gripped the edge of the bed, tears stinging his eyes before he could hide them. Mira blinked weakly, confusion flickering across her face. Her gaze drifted from the boy to the alpha standing behind him. "What happened?" she whispered. Kale's voice was low. "You saved him, again. And because of that, you saved us all." Rian reached for her hand, pressing it to his chest. "Mira," he whispered once more, the second word clearer than the first. Her tears slid silently down her cheeks. She smiled faintly. "You found your voice." He nodded, grinning through his tears. And Kale, alpha of Silverfang, once unbreakable, once cold as the northern peaks, bowed his head, humbled before the two souls who had taught him the truest kind of strength. Outside, dawn broke over the mountains, light spilling into the hall. For the first time in years, the air inside Silverfang didn't taste of fear. It tasted of beginning. Chapter 22. The New Order. 5 years had passed since the night blood and rain mixed on Silverfang marble. The pack had changed. Slowly, painfully, beautifully. The old laws were gone. The council hall, once a place of fear, now rang with the laughter of young wolves learning side by side. Alpha, Beta, Omega, no longer chained by rank but united by purpose. Mira stood at the edge of the new training yard, her voice calm but firm. "Balance your weight," she said to a trembling Omega girl, barely 12. "Don't fight the storm. Move with it." The girl's small claws hesitated, then steadied. A successful strike. The group cheered softly, pride rippling through them like light. Mira smiled, still quiet, still humble, but changed. The same girl who had once washed laundry under torchlight now taught others how to stand tall under the moon. She was not a warrior in title, but her spirit carried the authority of one who had faced storms and survived. From the balcony above, Cale watched. His once black hair carried streaks of silver now, but his eyes were softer, brighter. The alpha who ruled through fear had been replaced by a leader who ruled through respect. Beside him, Ryan leaned against the railing, taller now, broad-shouldered. His voice recovered, though he used it sparingly. The boy who once had no voice now chose his words with care. His hands, however, were never still. They moved constantly, sketching, carving, creating. Below, Mira called out, "Again!" as her students repeated their drills. Kyle noticed the small tools laid out beside her, metallic claws, light frames, new designs. He turned to his son. "You made these?" Ryan nodded, a hint of a smile. "They're for those who can't shift. Tools to protect, not to harm." Cale exhaled, pride and awe tangled in his chest. "You'll make a fine alpha one day." Ryan shook his head gently. "Maybe not an alpha, father. Just a good one." Cale chuckled, looking out over the yard. That might be better. The wind carried Mira's laughter to them, light and unguarded. And Cale, for the first time in decades, believed peace was not a myth. It was something you built, one act of compassion at a time. Chapter 23. The Heir and His Protector. Spring arrived like a promise. Silverfang's forests bloomed again, wildflowers threading through the grass where blood once fell. Mira crossed the courtyard barefoot, sunlight brushing her skin. Behind her, Ryan followed, a wooden staff in hand. "You're holding it wrong," she teased without turning. He raised a brow. "Am I?" The next second, the staff whirled, his move, fast and clean. Mira ducked, laughing, rolling into a counter. Their sparring was light, almost playful. The air filled with laughter instead of fear. "Better," she said between breaths, pushing back against him. "You're learning balance." "And you're still faster," he replied, grinning. "Unfair advantage. You taught me everything." "Then maybe I should stop holding back." She swept his leg. He landed flat on his back, laughing up at the sky. Kyle stood in the shade, watching them. His beta, now gray and weary, approached quietly. "They look happy," the older wolf murmured. Kyle nodded. "They are what I wanted this pack to be. Unbroken. Unafraid." "Will you tell them?" the beta asked softly. Cale smiled faintly. "That the story of the mud and the storm has become legend? They already know. But the young, they need to hear it again." As Mira helped Ryan to his feet, their eyes met. No longer Alpha's heir and servant, but equals bound by something far older than rank. The wind rustled through the blooming trees, carrying scents of rain and renewal. For once, Silverfang's heart beat not to the rhythm of war drums, but to laughter. Chapter 24. The Legend of the Mud and the Rain. Night settled over the packlands, soft and silver. Inside the nursery, the fire crackled as a dozen young pups curled under blankets, their eyes wide with wonder. "Tell us the story again," one begged. The old storyteller smiled. "Ah, the one about the storm?" All heads nodded eagerly. He leaned closer, voice low and rhythmic. "Long ago, when thunder ruled the skies and fear ruled the pack, a boy was trapped in the mud. The Alpha's only son, the one who could not speak." Gasps filled the room. Even the smallest pup whispered, "The muted heir." "Yes," the storyteller said. "He was sinking fast, and everyone watched, too afraid to move, too afraid to break the laws. Until—" He paused for effect. "A girl. A simple Omega. She waded through the storm when no one else would." The pups leaned forward. "She pulled him free, though the mud tried to swallow them both. And that act, small and foolish and brave, changed everything. Because sometimes, all it takes to break an empire of fear is one heart that refuses to look away." He smiled softly as their eyes sparkled. "And so, whenever it rains over Silverfang, the pack still whispers." The pups whispered with him, voices tiny but certain. Through the mud, through the storm, one Omega saw the child and chose to wade in. Outside, rain began to fall again, soft, endless, and kind. And in the Alpha's manor, Kale sat by the window watching it with a quiet smile. Down in the courtyard, Mira trained her next group of Omegas, while Ryan stood beside her, hand brushing hers as lightning flashed faintly in the distance. The storm no longer frightened them, it had become their legacy,